All right, so here we are, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining from. And a very warm welcome to all of you who are joining us from across, as you can see, geographies and time zones. It really fills my heart. We've had 125 people who registered, and so I made a request that please join in early since we have a capacity for only 100. And so I'm so grateful for all of you who joined here on time.
Maybe I can step in while Amrita is getting her connection again. So my name is Mark van den Einde, and very warm welcome to everyone. Like Amrita was saying, this is the first of a series of webinars that we are doing to introduce this idea of soulful organizations. So it's a project that has been close to our hearts for close to a year now. And we've been co-creating, we've been actually having our first projects now as well. But this is really an initiative to build some more awareness, to get the conversation going. And, it's very beautiful to see so many people showing interest and joining us today. And we have a very special guest. So that is Laura Saldivar. So welcome, Laura. And Laura is a dear friend of mine, somebody that I've known since 2018. And I've been very, very fortunate to work with her a couple of times when she was the Chief People Officer at Teach for America. And since then, she has started her own company, Piñata Possible. And she works with leaders to help them grow and express more of who they are and step into greater levels of leadership. And Laura has always been a very, very inspirational person to me and the work that she does. So we're really happy to have her with us today and to have her share a little bit about her journey as the Chief People Officer and what Soulful organization meant in that context, but also to hear about the work that you're doing today, Laura. When I think, when we came up with this theme of inner work for outer impact, you were the first person I thought of because when I first met you, you had this beautiful dream for the children that Teach for America was serving. And your dream was for them to all have the opportunity to realize their unlimited potential. But what was unique was that you knew that that change had to start within yourself and within your team, within your organization, so that that inner work was so core to who you are. And it's been so beautiful to see how that has rippled out into the world and continues to ripple out. So yeah, it's going to be really fun to hear more of your story. Of course, I know it quite well, but every time you tell it, it continues to inspire. And we have Natasha. Natasha, do you want to say a quick hi? So Natasha is going to be holding space for this conversation. She's going to be leading the conversation with Laura. So yeah, over to you. And we're going to have time for some questions. So we'd like to have at least 30 minutes at the end of the call to open it up and to have some conversation, some discussion. So please just note down any questions that come up for you, put them in the chat, and we'll get to that in the last 30 minutes.
Thank you,
So
Mark.
welcome
And
everyone.
while you were introducing, Amrita is back. So I think once you complete, maybe we can give a minute to Amrita to see if there's anything that she'd like to add there.
Yeah, complete on my end. So Amrita, please.
Thank you. And I just feel so grateful that even though I got swept off from this conversation, Mark could just, take off from where I left. And I'm sure it was just perfect. And that's really what, we're at Back to Source Building, which is a soulful organization. And it's really our response to this yearning that I was sharing, that I kept hearing. But this sense of, is there a business case for it? And they decided, people hold back, are not sure about it completely. And so we decided, let's do something about it. And these conversations, our resource sessions, as we're calling it, this is the first of many, are really our response to that, so that we can invite people to, unapologetically claim this inner work that we're so passionate about, and not just from a space of engaging with it for themselves, but we really feel this is the spark that will support the evolution of both individuals and organizations as we embrace this path. There's so much that I can say, but I'm just going to hold back and invite Natasha to take forth, and I'll meet you towards the end. But just a few housekeeping. Like Mark said, that we will have time for some questions and dialogue at the end. But do please put into your chat box anything that you feel you would like that comes up for you as you hear. And also, we'll try and keep ourselves on mute so that this session is being recorded for those who couldn't make it and in case you need to step out. But I know that you're in safe hands and you'll have a great time. So enjoy, and over to you, Natasha.
Thank you, Amrita and Mark. And thank you especially for opening our very first resource session. We've been dreaming together and talking together and working together around this idea of soulful organizations. And, we wondered if the time is right to start the conversation with people who want to have that conversation. And I'm so happy that Laura is our first guest on this series. I can't wait personally to hear all that she has to share. So Laura, thank you for joining us today. Today we are exploring the inner work of outer impact. Basically wondering how inner work fuels systemic change, how it shapes the collective, and if there are any tools that we might use in that direction. And so my first question, Laura, to you will be, what would a soulful organization mean to you?
Mm. That is a beautiful way to begin, Natasha, because I feel like we all on this call probably know it when we experience it, when we feel it, and we know when we're not experiencing it and not feeling it. And we might have our own words, in our own languages for how we would describe that felt sense. For me today, how I describe a soulful organization would be an organization that leads from its deepest knowing, that leads from that place of deep awareness, deep consciousness, deep knowing. And the word that I would probably use to describe what it feels like to me is an organization that's connected. And when I say connected, I mean connected in a few different ways. Connected to what's within the organization, maybe in that case, the power of its people, the power of its own systems and processes that allow the organization to run, but also connected outside of itself, connected to the context and the environment, the present moment that the organization is navigating through. And then there's this connection to, I would say, what's to come, a connection to what's beyond, whether that is an understanding of the future, an understanding of what's possible. For many organizations, we call that our mission and our vision, some variation of that. And so when an organization is connected in all those ways, I find that something happens. We lead from a different place when we know that it's actually all just one. It's all just connected, and we're part of a much larger system, which can be very helpful when we then go about solving the problems that we're navigating, to know that we're not alone and we're not the only ones trying to make a difference. So that's what I would call a soulful organization, a connected organization.
So the problems, but a different lens.
Mm-hmm.
And so
That's right.
Connection is what you would want to see in a soulful organization. What else might you see in a soulful organization?
I think what you would see, and what I have seen in a soulful organization, is that connection playing out in a variety of different ways. You would see and observe, if we had a camera that was kind of scanning across the organization, I think we would see conversations happening, and conversations that are ones of presence. So we would see people deeply listening, regardless of if they're in person or on Zoom. But we would see and we would observe a deep listening and a deep exchange, whether it's of ideas, experiences, challenges. And in those conversations, what we would be witnessing would be growth and learning and transformation through the power of that connection and that dialogue. And I think if we observe that, then we observe and have the creative potential to build anything that we really, really want within our organization in service of the missions that we're committed to.
And did you see any of this in while you worked with Teach for America or any of your clients that you work with today?
Yes. Yes. So there's kind of two lenses that I have on this. The first is having had a long career in the organization Teach for America. So I worked from the entry level all the way up to the C-suite, where I was the chief people officer leading all of our human capital and our people work. And from there, I then moved on to starting my own organization that is focused on developing leaders and helping leaders step into who they are truly meant to be, their most authentically expressed selves, so that those leaders can go forth and lead more soulful organizations and organizations that can allow the full potential of their people to be fully expressed. So it's a fun continuation of the same commitment, which is to human potential thriving. And what I observed, though, in terms of shifts, I have so many examples of this, but I'll give you just one very small one that makes a world of difference that I noticed over time. So in our organizational context, we were very mission driven. We were very committed. We had very ambitious goals. There was a lot we wanted to get done. And we really felt the calling and the pressure to deliver on all those bold goals, because we knew that those goals were in service of strengthening the lives and the outcomes of the students we served, the educators we served, the communities that we served. So when you do mission-driven work like that, as I know many folks here on the call do, it can feel like the weight of everything is on us as we try to deliver and be of service. And what I found is that contributed in our organization to a sense of urgency in the way we did or did not connect with one another. So we might hop onto a meeting or a meeting in person and get straight away into all the things that needed addressing, all the problems that needed fixing, all the to-dos on the list of actions we needed to take. And we would leave those meetings feeling even more urgent about what we wanted to go and do next, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but there was a next level possible. And I got to see this next level unfold in our organization when we started phasing in, what if our meetings began with human connection, checking in on how people are, checking in on what's present for them, taking a moment to come into presence. And it felt a bit radical at the beginning when we started doing this, because we started leading some meetings by starting with breathing. Can we take a couple of deep breaths to arrive into this meeting, to settle in the now, as opposed to our brains and our bodies and our awareness still being in the last meeting we were just in, or in the future that we're concerned and worried about? Can we just be in the present moment? And when we started to do that, particularly as an executive team, wow, I saw a bunch of new possibilities and new choices begin to open up for us, because we were slowing down to see all the possibilities that were available in the present moment and not operating from fear or worry or doubt, which was connecting us to the past and the future in a variety of different ways.
How fascinating. My brain is buzzing with questions of all types right now. But what I will ask you is that, so clearly this is one of the practices that you have tapped into to build a team that's more connected and leaning into that power of dialogue and connection and authenticity and pausing, right, before doing anything. And did you meet any resistance when you when you initiated this idea?
Yes. Yes. With some of the ideas that I'll talk about here today, I did experience quite a bit of resistance. And I like to speak about that because I think it's so normal and human for us to experience resistance. Because the first place the resistance occurs, and the first place it occurred for me, was within myself.
Mm.
So experiencing the resistance of this is new, this is different, I'm not quite sure. Very normal, very human for our bodies and our nervous systems to have a reaction to what's different, to have a
Yeah.
reaction to something that's new and never been done before, to have a
Yes.
reaction that's beyond what we know. And so that resistance is a normal response from our bodies when we step into the unknown or the unfamiliar. So, yes, I encountered resistance first within myself. Can I do this? I don't know how to do this. I'm not sure I see this done anywhere. Is this a good path to pursue? Then you start walking the path, and the path feels different and it looks
Yeah.
different, and different actions are starting to, become aware. And so then I started getting responses from people like, "Huh, why are you doing that? That's different. That's not how we typically operate here." And so then encountered a bit of resistance there again within myself of, oh no, am I on the right track? Am I doing the right thing? Is this going to be making a positive difference? Is this creating too much of a concern for people to be doing something that's out of the ordinary? Then there would be resistance that I would see in others as people were getting curious and excited about some new ways of operating. Then they would be experiencing resistance of like, well, I don't know. I'm not sure if we're good at this. I'm not sure if we have the right strategies, the right plans. And so, yes, we experience the resistance. And I like to think that the resistance is a sign that we're actually on a pretty wonderful track of exploring something new and different. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't still continue forward. It just means we might need to tend to ourselves and tend to our people and our community a bit differently so that we can hold that resistance together until it dissipates. Because it will dissipate as our bodies acclimate and adjust to whatever the newness is. Because we're so powerful
How,
in that way.
how beautiful is that? How beautiful is that example? And I mean, since you spoke about the executive team, there would be people who would adopt this sooner and there would be people who would adopt this later. So, do you remember what might you have noticed in decisions or team climates where people did or didn't take to inner work?
Yes. Yes. I have this vivid memory. It's one of my most tender memories from my own leadership because we were at an executive conference and I was asked to facilitate a session about our human talent work, our talent work. And when I got up to lead that session with my peers, my executive team, so our organization was structured where we had a senior leadership team and then we had a broader team of executives that were out in the field, just as a little bit of context. So this was a conference of all of our field executives. So we were a group of about 65 people in the room. So let's just to kind of paint the picture. And I got up to lead the session. And before I jumped into all the content of the session, what I wanted to do was exactly what I said. Can we pause and take a few breaths? Because we had had a conference that was packed with sessions, packed with ideas, packed with problems we wanted to solve. We were making a new operating model, doing a new approach to budgeting, trying to phase in a new 10-year strategic plan. So there was a lot we wanted to get done. So by the time we got to the conversation that I was leading, that was about our talent, our people systems, I could kind of tell in the room that we were already holding a lot. So I started the session with, let's take some deep breathing. Let's check in with our bodies. Let's check in on how we're feeling. And what unfolded after that was real concrete examples of the resistance that I think we were all holding within, bubbling to the surface. So people started expressing very high degrees of emotion, very high degrees of questioning, doubt that I think were not about the session, but were about whatever they had been storing underneath for those days, maybe for those previous months, maybe for previous years. It just started coming to the surface because we were taking a moment to pause and slow down. And so I remember getting the reaction, from the senior executive team of, oh no, what are we doing? We need to not do this. We need to go a different direction. We need to stop the session. You know, it was almost a little bit of fear of, are we going in the wrong direction? And I remember after that conference, I got feedback of, I'm not sure, Laura, that was a really good use of time. I'm not sure that we made the most of the executive's time in that way. And I remember wondering and thinking, I can see that. I can see that that was different. That was a
Yeah.
different kind of meeting. But what happened the next week, Natasha, is that I got a call from our CEO saying, hey, I think this COVID pandemic is actually more serious than we thought. We need to start getting into a planning process for how we're going to support the organization. And so I think what we were starting to sense into in that room, maybe not even knowing it, is that a lot of change was to come. There were going to be a lot of things under the surface that we needed to deal with, a lot of unknowns we needed to deal with. So by slowing down to meet that moment, we were actually in a preparation and a readiness process for ourselves for what was to come. So 2 weeks later, when I was on the executive meeting, now on Zoom, because we were in person before, now we're in Zoom, and I'm telling them, okay, this is what the COVID pandemic is. We're going to be stopping travel. We're going to be doing, all the things that we all navigated through in that time. Again, the resistance was there. Why are we doing that? I'm not sure that's the right call, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, we're going in this direction. And then 2 weeks later, no, everything was shut down, and we were all in quarantine. So we were, I think, starting to sense into there's change coming. Change can be a little bit scary, but if we can hold one another through that, a lot can be possible. So, it's one of those examples where in the moment I thought, I don't know, this is wrong. I'm not quite sure this resistance is bad, but it really was the resistance starting to soften us, I think, to be ready for what was to come, which we could not have predicted in that time.
So you tapped into a knowing unknowingly.
Yes. 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 And they tapped into that knowing, the other leaders in that room. And I think that knowing in some ways kind of scared them. Oh, wow, this really is my present experience. Oh, wow, this really is more exhausting than I thought it was. Or, wow, this is more difficult than I've admitted it to be. And that resistance, when it's occurring within us, it can feel very lonely, can feel very isolating until we see, oh, no, actually not alone in navigating the hard things. We're all feeling that resistance and that fear in some way. So how do we hold it together again until it can dissipate and we can then move forward into the future?
Yeah, coming to hard things, there are hard decisions that organizations have to make, hard times that they have to navigate. And I personally have thought that when you hear the sound of soulful organizations, it can sometimes land as too soft for some people. What would you have to say about that?
Yeah. Yeah, this was one of my great lessons of leading, organizational work that centered humanity. Was just starting to see that it's actually the same work at all levels of the organization. I'll give you an example of this. So our work at Teach for America was to support our students that we served to thrive, to ensure that they all had opportunities to receive an excellent education. And in order to deliver on that promise, we knew that many changes in the system were needed. There were many processes, many elements of the system in its original design that was not setting our students up for the success we knew they deserved. So our mission was about developing leaders who would go change those systems, to bring those systems to a different image of what could be for all of our students. And so there was so much dedication for how do we serve our students? How much can we do to deliver for them? That sometimes we forgot that we needed to invest in the layers of people before that to create the ripple effect. So I'll give you an example of that. Our students were directly served by our teachers, and our teachers were directly served by our staff, and our staff was directly served by our HR team, our executive team. Our leaders were in service of the staff. And sometimes we would jump to the level of how are we as an organization in service of our students, which is beautiful and good. That's our guiding light. But our lever to pull was the level and lever at the staff. Because if we
Okay.
poured into and invested in the staff would then invest in our teachers, and our teachers would then invest in our students.
That's right.
And if we were to leap, we were missing beautiful opportunities to create that continuity. And so whenever we were not connected, back to my word about connected, and we were jumping the levels without accounting for the human beings that were at those other levels, we were missing real opportunities to make it all in sync, if you will.
Mm.
So I found that, you know, to have a truly soulful organization, we needed to back all the way up to where the ripple effect started, which is actually within ourselves. So for us to
Mm.
be the leaders that could be in service, we needed to also sit with and look at, well, what's within me that needs some of that attention so that I can have the energy and the focus and the commitment to be able to deliver at my level, which again, when we start that and ripple that out, wow, then our students are able to say, okay, how am I a leader? How am I in the
Mm.
present moment learning and navigating the dynamic world as it unfolds? And so that's really what we were trying to create. And I think we learned sometimes the hard way that we can't skip any of the levels. We can't skip over the people. We need to
Mm.
include all of the people in the process.
Mm. I'm seeing like a web of interconnections, and everybody connected to one another, and it's like really not skipping anybody, but really seeing every single individual, every single layer, giving them a place. And
Yeah.
that's so important for balance in a system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was hard, Natasha. It was hard because that was not necessarily the dominant way of seeing things. I think because we were so committed to our students, we wanted all of our attention to be on our students. But what was happening within our organization is that our educators were having mixed experiences. They were telling us, hey, you know, we're not quite feeling heard, we're not quite feeling seen. And our staff was telling our executive team, hey, we're not quite feeling heard, we're not quite feeling seen. And so it was a moment for us to say, okay, maybe we've been placing so much attention on our students that now we have to bring our awareness to these places where people feel like they've been overlooked. And that was very hard work. That was very tender work because, again, to the point about the resistance, what was coming up from underneath the experiences of people were some tough questions we needed to sit with. Where had we designed systems that unintentionally undervalued our people? And I can speak
Mm.
about those specific examples if helpful, but that was the big work we wanted and needed to take on to create that deeper connection and continuity and like a congruous way of supporting the whole system.
Yeah, taken in any other industry, this very essence, I think, lies at the base of so many issues. So I think this is very much, I think it runs across contexts, to be honest. I mean, that's how I'm receiving it. And so it's and how did you actually start then? Did you start at the very top? Did you actually do like the whole organization? How did you go about it?
I went about it in two different ways. One was, I'd say, in the small micro practices that I told you about, of how can I start bringing in a bit more of the humanity? How can I honor the humanity, whether that's in a meeting with starting off with genuine connection, whether that's in creating some spaciousness for people who I know who are carrying a lot and allowing them, you know, to have that space to not have to work as many long hours, for example. So, you know, I started to look at micro ways that I could be in support of people. And then I would say we took on big systemic things for the
Mhm.
organization overall to address, again, some of those pain points that existed for our people. So there were a couple of big projects that I remember in year one we took on. The first was the overhaul of our entire compensation system. And we
Mm.
had a compensation system that there was a lot to be proud of, but our employees, our staff members had had real concerns about it for several years. All of the data on our employee surveys was in concern about the compensation system, telling us, hey, we're not sure this is kept up with the market. Hey, we're not feeling this really values the full work that we're doing. Hey, we know that we, you know, are a nonprofit, but also look at some of our peers in our community, something seems off. And for multiple years, we'd gotten data like this. And we'd made some tweaks to the compensation system. But when I came into the role of Chief People Officer, I thought, well, let's just overhaul it. Let's get our arms around, what really is the new data? What are the people saying? How can we make real adjustments by looking at the whole system? So we started off that project in two ways. One was gathering a group of staff members together to listen to them and their perspectives. They went out and listened to more employees to gather perspectives. So we had the lived experiences included in any path forward. Then we went and consulted with an expert in compensation studies, and they ran all the external analyses about our market, our industry, our competitor, like all of that. And we took all of that together, and I will never forget this. It was so astounding because the compensation analysts came back and said, yes, it does appear that you are about 7 years behind in terms of the adjustments you could make to bring your compensation to the next level of competitiveness for the market. And the data that we had from our staff had started to deteriorate, right? The numbers had started to go down in terms of their satisfaction with compensation about 7 years prior. So the people knew and were sensing this, were communicating this, right, for that amount of time. And it matched up with the real numerical data that we were studying. So we were able to take all that and say, great, what an opportunity for us to reset the system in a way that's inclusive of the ideas and wisdom of our people, as well as the best of the data and the analytics that are out there. And let's create a new system that builds off of the best of what we've had, but isn't limited by what we've been doing in the past. And so that process, that multi-year process of resetting that system, was one of the largest changes for our organization at scale, because it impacted every single person in our organization in a very deep way. Their livelihood, their salary, the work that they were doing every day, to really honor their contributions. So that was one example, of how, again, the wisdom is in the people, and we can really honor that wisdom, listen to it, and then the people, when they get a solution at a system level, can feel, all right, now I can exhale. My input, my perspective has been valued, seen, and included in the path forward for the organization.
I've been in HR for over 2 decades, and compensation is such a scientific, it has a very scientific approach, very process driven, etc. I think just the fact that you add this human angle and listening and dialoguing, I think that itself gives a lot of heart and soul to the whole process. And so thank you for sharing that example.
Yeah, thank you for asking.
I want to segue just a little bit here. At Back to Source, we've collaborated with Being at Full Potential. And I know that you have worked with the Human Potential Assessment and their whole framework for a long time, for yourself, for your clients. How would you see that, the work of soulful organizations being done with the support of Human Potential framework at Being at Full Potential? What connections have you seen?
Yes. So for those of you that are on the call who maybe are not as familiar with Being at Full Potential, that's where I was a few years ago. And I'm going to tell you exactly how I found Being at Full Potential, and then how impactful it was for me over the course of the journey I've just been describing for the last several years. So when I came into the role of Chief People Officer for Teach for America, I did not have a traditional HR background. I was not formally trained in HR. I had grown up through our organization. And so I came in really wanting to learn, what is the best of what's out there for how we can support human potential to thrive. And there was one night, but before I was starting in the job, I'd accepted the position, I was excited to get going, where I found myself awake in the middle of the night with buzzing with all the ideas. I don't know if this has happened to you all, where it's like the ideas are flowing in, the questions are flowing in. And so I got up and I went to go sit on my couch, and I went to my Google browser, and I said, okay, how do you measure human potential? That was what I typed into Google.
As basic as that.
As basic as that. How does an organization measure human potential? Because I didn't know how to do that. And what came up was a website for being at full potential. And so I clicked on that. I said, what's this? I don't know what this is. And I started reading this website for being at full potential, which was an organization committed to awakening human potential in organizational settings. And they had a tool that they had created over the last several years that was for measuring human potential. And they had built this through a lot of listening, learning of wisdom traditions, the best of like what science has to offer, their deep knowing. And I thought, well, this sounds really cool. I don't know what this is, but the only thing to do here is just to send an email to learn more. So I typed up an email to the email address I found on the website. And I said, hey, I know you don't know who I am, but I really resonate with what I'm seeing on your website. I'm coming into this role where I'm going to be working with an organization that's committed to students thriving, human potential. Here's my mission. Here's my vision. And I just sent that email. Nope. Can I learn more? And so I got an email back from Mark, who you just heard at the top of the call. And from there, we started a conversation and a connection to learn a little bit more about what Being at Full Potential offered. And what they had and what Mark offered to me was a chance to take their human potential assessment, which was their measurement tool. He said, try this out. Try taking this assessment tool, complimentary, opportunity for you to try it out and see what you discover. And so this assessment, I don't know if y'all have taken these kinds of organizational assessments and personality assessments. There's so many of them. There's so many of them. This one was unlike any I had ever taken. And the results came back. And and Mark told me, he said, you're going to get the results. And my recommendation is that we get on a coaching call, that you actually have a coaching call to make meaning of your results. And that coaching call, again, was unlike anything I'd ever experienced, where I started to see, oh, wow, there is a totally new paradigm for leadership than what I have been present to, that is more deeply connected to who I am at my core and how I can be expressed. Because this assessment doesn't just measure my strengths and weaknesses or my organization's strengths and weaknesses. It measures how expressed we are in the limitless potential we have within ourselves as individual leaders and within our organizations. And so I started to see, oh, if we can just create the conditions for our potential to be expressed, whether that's creating conditions for me as an individual leader, creating conditions for the organization, we can do unprecedented things. So I took this assessment, I had the coaching call, and this was right before I started in the job. And I said, this is it. Like, I don't know what this world is. I don't know anything about it other than what I've just scratched the surface on, tip of the iceberg, but this is the future. And so I asked Mark, I said, do y'all do like facilitation or I don't know, is that something you do? And he said, well, yeah, we can do that. And so I said, well, I'm about to meet a leadership team that I don't know. For a team I'm about to walk into, I don't know that team either. Would you like to come facilitate for my leadership team retreat? And so, long story short, before you knew it, Mark and parts of his team were flying across the ocean. I was meeting them for the first time in person at the retreat with my leadership team. And then over the next year, we did so much work together that 1 year later, Mark and his team flew back in and facilitated the entire conference for my whole team, which was an 80-person plus team. So ripple effects, right? Started off with just me taking the assessment. Then it was my leadership team. Let's all take the assessment. Let's talk about how we are as a collective. Then it was the whole team. Now all 80 of us, let's take the assessment and talk about how we are at the collective. And every time we did that, there was a big release of all the stuff we were carrying under the surface, all the conditions that weren't working, so that we could then step into creating the conditions that could work for us. And when we had that conference as a whole team, it was just 3 months before the pandemic came and we needed to rally to support our entire organization through that time of tension and challenge and change and uncertainty. So again, there was a knowing, there was a knowing there, even if I didn't know to call it that at that time. So being at full potential gave me the measurement tools and the way to access the conversation for something I knew I wanted, but didn't know or didn't have the language to express.
So the measurement itself, I mean, I've taken it, so I know the experience is very different from any other measurement tool. It also measures very differently. It gives a very different output. I know that. But tell me, for people who are not coaches in organizations specifically, in the one that you were in, how did they experience it? How did they use it to link their inner process to what they were doing at work professionally?
Yes. Yes. So the way the assessment is structured is you get this very comprehensive report that shows you on a variety of different dimensions and competencies how you as an individual are relating to those themes. And it'll
Yeah.
also show you, on a scale, right? How expressed are you in those different domains? And we'll give you lots of recommendations for how, if one of my big recommendations, you all, is if you've not taken this assessment, an invitation to explore it, because I believe Mark and the Being at Full Potential team make it available. It's been very important to them to have open access for folks to do their individual work. So find that assessment and try it out, because you'll learn a lot about yourself through the process. But what I found is it became a tool that anchored conversations for development. Whether I was working with an individual leader, whether I was working with my whole team, I could see, this domain here is one where we're not very fully expressed as a team. I'll give you an example of that. One of those might have been a connection to a larger purpose. So if I could see, oh, wow, my team is not feeling a connection to a larger purpose, how can I help them reconnect? Because if they can reconnect to our purpose, then that's going to be infused in whatever it is they're creating and designing and how they're stewarding the work and relationships with other people beyond our team. So that's a pretty big thing to uncover, that we've lost sight of our purpose, of why our work matters in the bigger picture. And that's totally normal. It's hard. We're trying to deliver every single day. Sometimes we
Yeah.
get into the details instead of the bigger picture. So this became a tool for us to say, what's missing and how do we go about creating those connections for people so that they can deliver the very best possible work in a way that's also nourishing and supportive and fulfilling for them as leaders. And then it fuels a beautiful cycle. They're feeling more fulfilled, so they deliver better work. They deliver better work, and then they feel more fulfilled. And now we're in a more productive cycle of success, as opposed to, I've lost sight of my purpose, my work is suffering. Now that cycle is what was being fueled. So, that was a really big way to pivot, on the team toward a more productive and peaceful, honestly, peaceful way to work as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm calling it the assessment, but really we should find another word for it. I think the insights that come from that, the exploration, the discovery that comes through that has a different quality, because it talks about, it hinges on actually very human qualities. That is
Yes.
that they're not covered in any other tool of any kind of measurement. And again, measurement is a wrong word. It's a starting point for
Yeah.
discovery. So yeah, I know what you're talking about. I think a lot of people would benefit from taking that. So if you haven't already been introduced, please head off to the link that Mark has shared, and you can just take it. Any of us can have a conversation with you on that. Coming back to now, you've been through the pandemic and you've been through all of this. Very often we see in organizations that inner work starts when people burn out or are exhausted, or something has broken in their lives, and then they
Yeah.
start looking internally. I'm wondering, if you were to design for sustainability, um, what's the what kind of boundary or practice or shift that you think that leaders could normalize?
Yeah, that leaders can normalize to support what can feel like a more sustainable path forward. Yes. So, one practice that I have come to rely on, that I learned from a dear coach friend of mine, is that there are no problems. Now, this is going to sound a little bit wild. There are no problems. What's a problem is the fact that we've made whatever the thing is a problem. I'm going to connect
Okay.
this to being at full potential, because being at full potential, one of the beautiful competencies that's in there is this idea of going from a problem solving orientation into an opportunity seeking orientation. It's a different way to look at the same circumstances, right? So if I go back to my
Yes.
example of the compensation system, the compensation system is a problem. We need to make improvements on it. We need to tweak it. Now I'm just shifting the compensation system of the past, making some incremental progress on it, right? It's a problem to be fixed. I'm orienting to it as a problem. Opportunity seeking would be to say, okay, how do we create the compensation system that we need for the future? We don't have to be tied to anything from the past. How do we treat that as an opportunity instead of a problem, and allow ourselves to be in the creative space of doing things we've never done before, of trying something out that might be very, very different than anything we've ever known? So that kind of orientation, again, we're looking at the same numbers, spreadsheets, formulas, but with a different orientation. And I share that because this itself is a sustainability building leadership practice. If we as leaders can look at the circumstances we're navigating through and shift from this is a problem into where is the opportunity in this? Because problem orientation, problem solving can create that heaviness. There's an energy of like, oh gosh, more problems to fix, more. And the burden of that, it can be what really burns people out. But when we can relate to those same circumstances as, okay, yeah, can I be observing this? These are the facts that I'm working with, and where's the opportunity I want to create towards it? It can give us a more joyful experience to do some of the same kind of work. And when we can cultivate, again, an inner experience of joy and peace and excitement, and even if it's, difficult work we're doing, if we can feel hopeful and optimistic and committed to it, we are going to be able to sustain it differently than if we're feeling beaten down, overwhelmed, overworked, it's impossible, right? That keeps us feeling more fatigue and burnout, and eventually is no longer sustainable. So I think the sustainability practice really is, can I shift how I'm looking at the very reality, that I'm dealing with, so that I can see there is a bunch of possibility here. It's not just a bunch of problems. So yeah, that's one practice. And again, it can start with, can I breathe deeply to see, okay, can I settle enough to know that even though this feels like a problem, and we can honor that it feels that way, I don't have to treat it like a problem. I don't have to define it as a problem. I don't have to define myself as a problem. I can define this as a moment to create a future filled with possibility and potential. That's how I then make the most of the potential that I am and that I have and that we have collectively.
And this is beautifully supported by the work that Mark has done for the under the water change and inner process starting right here, as opposed to in response to something that is breaking down.
That's right. That's right. We are seeing in our organizations all of the external results, all of the external impact that is the result of the inner experience and impact. Back to my example of the ripple effect, we were seeing certain results or outcomes in our measurements at all levels of performance of the organization that were really reflective of, oh, wow, we're not connected to our purpose. So if we address that, what's the ripple effect then? All the way to the results. This was my first opportunity to see, oh, we can measure that. We can get temperature checks on that to see, yeah, change at the inner level of who we are being is influencing what we are doing. And I think that was the most radical language shift that I saw in our organization. The more we started talking about who are we being? How are we being? If we're being fearful, how does that impact our results? If we're being committed, how does that impact our results? Yeah.
And nice that you brought the word temperature check. How often did you do the temperature check?
I would say we did for our leadership team. I mentioned it was kind of an annual thing. So I worked with myself, and then I did the leadership team, and then I did the full team. And we just did the assessment that one time. So the assessment, can be done many times, but we did the assessment once to get a collective report and read. And then we would rely on our other measures, like our culture engagement scores and our dashboards that were measuring all of our outputs, to again look at how are we performing relative to the competencies we said we wanted to target? So we were able to isolate a few things and then see how that was playing out in all of the different measurements we had. So, we would have our quarterly step backs, and the results would come in on our staff culture engagement 2 times a year. So we would be able to use those measures as ongoing temperature checks. Now with the lens, we were already doing those temperature checks. Now with the lens for who are we being in that effort to perform.
For all the years that I've been in human resources, done engagement surveys, and then sat to analyze what come and what are we going to do about it, never once did I ask, who are we being? And, sitting and really pausing and taking a breath and checking in and seeing how is this landing for us? So, it's so refreshing to hear this story from you, really. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And I think I have one last question, and then I'll leave it open to the floor. Did you meet any resistance to using the human potential framework itself? Because it's, it's not statistically science, right? It's somewhere between science and art, sort of. And while it does measure, doesn't measure, right? It tells you the degree to which you have expressed something or not expressed something. The potential is there. It's different language. Did you find any resistance for that? Because this is one of the vehicles you used for the work that you did. And so for the vehicle itself, did you find any resistance on this kind of language? Because people are used to a different sort of assessment language.
Yes, I did. And part of what I think I learned, and this is what I do with my clients now when I offer them the opportunity to take the assessment as part of our coaching work together, is I'll give them the context and I'll say, this is going to feel a bit different. This is going to be a different kind of assessment. You might experience some words in here and some questions in here that are different than your past experiences with these types of assessments. And that's because this assessment is measuring some things where I personally believe the science is not yet caught up. The science has not yet caught up. And so we are in many ways looking at very ancient practices, wisdom traditions, things that we all actually do already know. So it's more of a remembering that we know these things as opposed to, the knowledge is somewhere outside of me and I've got to go seek it. It's almost just, how do I remember that I do already know this? I'm going to give you a little example of this. One of the questions that I think, or one of the competencies that I think kind of shocked people at first, and I see this even now when I'm working with people one-on-one, is there's a competency around play. Yeah. Where is there play in your life, in your leadership? And people are at first are like, play? I don't even, does that belong at work? Is that something I'm supposed to have in my life? And yet we know it from when we were young. We know it. I remember doing my coaching conversation of the assessment. It's like, let's recall a memory. Like, what was the way you used to play when you were 6 years old? And immediately I'm like, oh, I know exactly. I used to swing on the tree back and forth, and I would always want to go to the next level of height on the swing. Okay, well, how is that actually playing out now in my leadership, where I'm comfortable going back and forth and I always want to go to the next level? How is that an example of play that's different from other people's types of play? That's a very solitary way to play. Are there some people played with teams and with groups? And so to be able to just study our leadership through the lens of something like that is a remembering of who we are and a remembering that there are many ways to bring that into our day-to-day leadership. So again, something like that, can feel a bit radical to people, like, oh, wow, in my work context, where can I bring in more play? And guess what? When we have play, we have creativity. When we have creativity, we have better solutions. We have better solutions, we get better results, right? So it's the same kind of ripple effect if we allow ourselves to look at something that might feel new and different, but it's really just a remembering of who we are.
Well, thank you for sharing. And you're right to pick up that one word of play, that one aspect of it's really something that we as adults sometimes don't remember that much. And I would really put a hyphen in that, remember, because integrate it back into our lives and into who we are. Because that actually is sometimes the the route for inventiveness and experimentation and just trying things for the sake of it sometimes. And then, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. It's been such a lovely conversation. I don't know how almost an hour has just flown by. I could listen to you for
Mm.
another 1 hour.
Oh.
So I'm going to hand off soon to a lovely audience here who's been listening very carefully. And before I do that, we did say head off to the assessment. Is there any other piece of um, suggestion or something you'd like to encourage them to see, to get familiar with this whole philosophy around soulful organizations or, Mark's work around human potential framework?
I would say that if any part of this inner work calls to you, there's two things I'd like for you to know and maybe take away with you as some encouragement. One is you're not alone. 124 people registered for this call, and there are many conversations beginning to bubble up all over the world around how do we link our inner work to the outer impact and results and mastery, of what we're able to achieve out in the world. So you're not alone if you're feeling this calling. I think sometimes leaders feel a calling towards this, and it kind of scares us at first. Of like, I don't know, that's different than what I see everyone else doing in my organization or in my industry, but so that's the first thing. You're not alone. The second thing is you might be on the cutting edge. Like you will be on the cutting edge. I think measurement is still catching up. The science is still catching up. The organizational textbooks are still catching up. The higher education, MBA classes are still catching up. This is the cutting edge. And in many ways, it's the cutting edge, but it's also the ancient ways. It's like the ancient knowing. So it's a both and. We're remembering, but we're also on the cutting edge. And so if you're feeling like, I don't know, this is a little bit weird and different than what I see, take that as a good sign. Take that as a good sign that you're actually helping to open up a new possibility, a new paradigm, a new pathway for other people who need us and need you to open those doors so that they can walk in afterwards. And so I would invite you to explore in the ways that feel really good to your soul, to who you are, to your leadership style. Continue to learn. The assessment is one way to do that. Continuing in these types of conversations is one way to do that. Your own personal practice, of breathing, tuning in, getting present is a way to continue that. So my invitation to you is to really continue the exploration in what ways feel good and supportive of you, and to know you're not alone and you might be on the cutting edge. And that means we should just keep walking the path because we clear it for others as we do.
Thank you, Laura. It was so nice to hear about inner work, about her impact. I have not seen so many examples of this packed into 1 hour. Thank you so much. So I'm going to take a
You're
break
so
here
welcome.
and invite our lovely audience if they have any questions. I'm going to just hop over to the chat and see if what's there. Yeah, Soundarya is saying, I'm so glad we're having these conversations now more than ever. Oh, yes, I'd like to hear more of that. It's a conversation I seem to have every day at work with young kids.
Mm-hmm.
Care to share more? Soundarya, maybe come off mute.
Marcus,
For that.
go ahead.
Hi, Mark. Hi, everyone. So glad to be here today, and thank you, Mark, for sending across this invite earlier to be here. So, being at full potential is something that I happened to come across with Mark during one of my work days a couple of years back. And I did go through the entire exercise with Mark about discovering the full potential, and the way he walked me through the report, explaining, what my true potential is, and making me realize it. Somehow life happened, and I never could really come to, explore that bit of it. But I just recently got in touch with him, so that's why I'm here. So I recently joined a workplace, and there's a bunch of freshers who've just graduated. They've joined in from a B school, and they're all from different walks and phases of life. And what is happening at the workplace right now is a big corporate restructure.
Yep.
And these kids are getting thrown around literally from department to department. And every day they have this conversation with me about, but how do I really bring out the best of my work? I'm really not doing what I really want to do. And they're beginning to question their capabilities and if they really have the potential to do what they decided they want to do as a career. So, that's where I feel that organizations really need to start listening in more to their employees and really help them discover their potential and help them maximize it rather than just look at them as full-time employees helping them achieve some task at the end of the day. So that's where the conversation emerged from.
And I wonder right now what Laura's marks of a soulful organization of deep connection, deep listening, dialogue, what that might unfold in this scenario. I'm actually quite curious.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Marcus, you had a question?
Yes, a question. I didn't know if Laura was going to respond to that or no. Or...
Can I just
Laura?
maybe
Oh,
respond briefly to Sundari?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, just very briefly, Sundari, thank you for that. And I think, Laura spoke about how human potential is innate in all of us, and that it's, when we create the conditions for it to be expressed, amazing things happen. The same way, when we create conditions for human potential to be repressed or held back, that also has consequences, right? When people start doubting themselves and start doubting their capabilities, you're actually going backwards. And it can have, just like unleashing human potential can have tremendous impact on, the performance and the bottom line and all the things that we want to have impact on. When we're pushing human potential down and not allowing it to come through, and people start doubting themselves, the opposite will happen very, very quickly as well. So I just want to say that it can go both ways pretty quickly.
Yep. Thank you for
yes.
that, Mark. Yep.
I was just going to add to restructuring in an organization. We navigated quite a bit of that at Teach for America. And I have, experienced, restructuring as well, my own personal life and leadership. It can have a very destabilizing effect on people because, quite honestly, you're taking the structure that they've been resting upon and depending upon and counting on to be consistent, and it's getting changed. So whenever that change is introduced, right, the body has that immediate reaction of either resistance or it's that survival strategy that kicks in of, wait, hold on, can I survive this destabilization? How do I steady myself? So the more we can, as Mark was saying, listen to our people and understand and hold the space for them to restabilize amidst instability, that itself can be a micro practice because it can shift moment to moment, hour to hour, month to month, where doubt creeps in without us controlling that. And so instead of pretending we're not doubting, instead of blaming ourselves for doubting or blaming our employees for doubting, we can just hold the space for the doubt to be present and then for the doubt to pass through after it's taught its lessons. So, again, in a destabilized environment, which is very normal now in our world, how do we allow ourselves to create the stability from within, settle so that we can navigate the destabilizing environment that surrounds us?
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Laura.
Armin?
Oh, I think
Marcus
Marcus
was
was gonna.
first.
Yeah, but
Marcus
then
was
his
first.
order changed. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, that's magic. That's magic.
Thanks, Armin. Yeah, Zoom automatically put my hand down. First, thank you for this conversation, Laura and Natasha. I heard you speak so much about congruence, a through line, continuation, and so on. And you mentioned mission and vision. And whenever I put those two together, it's always the third piece that I feel we miss or that I'd love to add to the conversation, but that's origin also, where we're from.
Mm.
And I think that's what inner work is. It's understanding that inner place and why, as execs and in C-suite, oftentimes we're professional adults, let's just say, we don't expand because we don't we didn't have that origin understanding, weren't seen when they're young. Emotional neglect is one thing that's often seen in across all socioeconomic classes. But as adults, and going back to Dan Siegel's work with parenting from the inside out, the greatest work we can do is have a, as he says, a coherent narrative of our past, understanding how we came here. And I just wanted to insert that into the conversation because I think that's a point worth leaning into, like knowing ourselves. And that's what the inner work is.
Yes.
That's what we are talking about here. If to pose a question, it is in your organization at the executive level, like, is there work for highlighting the origin and having people feel comfortable there to find their authentic self? I think that I'm kind of pitching you a softball question here because I mean that is what inner work is. But yeah, in intentionality, bringing our origin stories to say, hey, this is where we're from, how far we've come, and where we're going.
Yes. I love that you've added this in, Marcus. There's a book that I'm currently, well, I'm going to say I'm writing it, but also allowing it to come forward because it is on this very theme around the origin and the story of how we came to be. And part of what I'm exploring with this writing that I'm doing is how can we honor the story of who we are, how we've come to be, how we've been shaped by our environments without being limited by those stories, to know that we always can be the authors, the authorities of our own stories. And I think sometimes people jump to a vision for the future and what we're trying to create for the future. And those are beautiful things without realizing and honoring what was. And so if we don't realize and honor what was, the origin of where we've come from, sometimes we're missing the opportunity to really have the wholeness of it all. And so I think now as I work with leaders who are really excited about creating possibility and wanting to build for a future, oftentimes what we're doing is revisiting, well, what's the original story you've been living? In what ways has that contributed to the tremendous success you've had, the tremendous accomplishments you've had, the joy you've had? In what ways has that contributed to some breakdown? How can we hold all of that, honor all of that, allow all of that, and then not be limited by any of that? There's a next level of joy. There will be, continued breakdowns in the future. There will be all of it, but how do we allow and honor what was, celebrate that, and then still allow ourselves to remember that we have the authority to create whatever we want to create? So I find this beautiful both and. How do we look towards the future while still honoring the present and the now and the where we've been? And I just love what you've said. And that can be done. Absolutely. And I think it's one of the things that can be a little bit tense in a work environment because people feel like, oh, we just want to go to the future. Why are we spending time looking at what we did? But it's like part of it is to give it completion. Part of that is to give it completion. This was our compensation system. Exhale. Let's honor that. We all got paid with that system for a long time. We didn't like some stuff about it. Thank goodness we had it. All of that. And now we're going to create something new. So it can be in those ways as well. That kind of honors where people are in the change itself. So thank you for adding that to the conversation. That's so beautiful.
Honoring the complete story. Yeah. Harman, I know you had your hand up. This time I'll get the order straight.
Thank you so much, Natasha, and thank you for this wonderful conversation. Very rich, also the addition about origin. Yeah, there is a curiosity in me. I have two questions, if I may. There is a curiosity. We're talking about soulful organizations, and in a way, we sort of tracked back to it starts with the inner work, and it starts all the way connecting to what you said, the sea level, and then the right levers. And ultimately, I'm also curious about. So after all of that, did you notice, either at the student level or even beyond the organizations that you were working with, that something of that soul also sparkled outwards? Or what was the impact of you going through this process as an organization? And the second question is more related to where are you now in terms of what what are the sort of the cutting edge fields that you are now working with those leaders in, with all of your background, your experiences? What is emerging from all of the wisdom that you have lived, uncovered, and are learning?
Yeah. Oh, I love both of those questions. Thank you, Armin. And so nice to see you, by the way.
Absolutely.
The first thing I would say is yes, when we do this inner work, I find we get a bit more sensitive to the environment. And so I could walk around the organization and see ways in which people were dealing with the resistance, which itself could be a sign of progress, right? I think that was kind of the first step. And then we're able to have the resilience to step forward to create something new. And I'll give you an example of this. So I just had the experience last week of going back and facilitating some things for Teach for America. I've been gone from the organization for a few years now at this point. And in going back, I can see some of the shifts in the organization that we were talking about several years ago, wanting to be true. In terms of some of the very concrete things, we want to have a new operating model. We want to have a new budget. Remember, I was telling you about that before. In that executive conference, we were talking about how are we going to make this happen? You know, it's all so big and it's all coming at us at the same time. Now, several years later, as someone who's coming in from outside of that system, now back in to hold space for people, I can see, oh, wow, they're doing it. They're doing the thing that we talked about as an idea. They're in the new compensation model. They're in the new operating model. They're in the new budget planning cycle. They're in new team structures, stuff that was at one point an idea on a page. And now, as I observe them, there's still resistance because now they're dreaming up the next level. They're like, okay, well, now where we want to go is, you know, in a more, I don't know, like it's just specifically in that context, they're dreaming up some new ways to orient to the systemic change required as the school systems have evolved as well. So, you know, they're able to now channel their attention to that because they've already navigated it within their organization. So it's been a really interesting ripple effect to watch from the outside of how they've continued to evolve internally and how that positions them to navigate all the challenges that are happening out in schools right now. So this is one thing. Yes, signs of resistance, but also signs of we're actually where we once dreamed we would be. I see that in a lot of different places now as an outsider to the organization. For me, how it's continued on in my practice, so I've decided to bring all this leadership development work to be of service to those who serve. So I work with a lot of social impact leaders now who are in positions of leading bold endeavors, whether they are starting an organization, leading an organization, trying to turn around an organization, or they're trying to also be a leader in their family, in their community, you know, on a board. But they are people who are up to something big and bold. They want collective social good, and something feels stopped. Something feels like it's in the way. Something feels like they can't get to the other side, or they're experiencing some kind of breakdown. And so because I now have all this evidence of when we relate to the breakdown as just the opening to where we're going to break through to something new, I'm able to hold that space for them to do whatever falling apart, falling away needs to happen so they can get back to the origin, as Marcus was talking about, honor that, and then step into their vision and then step into their mission. So it's very alive for me now. It's just the core way I see the world is I am here to help human potential thrive. That's always been part of the career journey. And now I get to do that for leaders who are able to take it into their contexts to set up the systems, processes, and structures that allow human potential to thrive at a new level. So yeah, the inner work continues now in a lot of contexts as it gets more and more real in the outer world.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for asking.
Priyanka?
Yeah. Hi, Laura, and hi, Natasha. So nice to hear both of you. Well, this question, I think, came to my mind even when I was doing the course with Mark. I have done the certification. We are talking about building soulful organizations or on social media, or we are trying to have initial conversations with a lot of corporates. And of course, there will be some biases then. Um, I understand that how this movement or this work connects with holistic growth. However, a lot of leaders, especially who are extremely profit driven, focused on profit and tangible shift in numbers, etc., they might, sort of feel in the beginning that, um, is this really important for me? And, you were talking about building connection and making people feel seen and heard, and that's going to take a lot of time. And the bigger the organization, the bigger the work of making people feel seen and heard. And is this really important for me? I mean, my work is to deliver the product or, improve the technology. And so, it might feel that that is not really, they might think that if I start listening to each and every person, then, it might just be too overwhelming. And I have to decide where I have to take the organization and not like, getting that information from people. So, which is also, I feel, stuck in the like the past paradigm of how we have been frozen in this space. And right now we are transitioning. So to really sort of, like connect or build that relativity with a leader who is, in such a mindset, while I understand that having, an exploration, a conversation like this can be so broadening and can bring in so many possibilities, but they might just not relate with it. So from your experience of meeting these kind of people, if you have, or uh, knowing whatever you know about these mindsets, etc., what do you feel from your experiences, a lever or a phrase or, a segue that sort of, warms them up to this conversation?
Yes. Beautiful question. And I definitely experienced this with members of my team and the supervisors in my organization as well, where the readiness was different. The openness was different, depending on the leader who I was talking to. And I think the first opportunity is to know that while the leader at the top, let's say the CEO or whatever, has a ton of positional power, that everyone in the organization has power. And so being able to see that sometimes we go where the energy is strong. Like in our organization, what actually started happening is that the people started organizing and sharing ideas for the changes they wanted to see, which then caught the attention of the executive team. So, no, there was a different level of power when the people started organizing. And I share that because when we go where the energy is strong, it reminds me of that adoption curve. Have you all seen that, where there's the early adopters who are going to be the ones like, yes, I'm totally on board. And that's where the energy maybe is strong. There's greatest alignment. But then there's people on the rest of the curve that really won't get on board with a new idea until they see lots of other evidence of it. They see lots of other people on board with it. They see the results and the impact of it. And so sometimes it can be frustrating for us to say, well, why can't I get that person on board, when really we may not be the people to get that person on board. It may be the other people that need to come along that will then speak to and motivate the folks farther down the line. So for someone who's in the top spot in the organization, for example, who maybe is not thinking through this lens, I think an opportunity there is to, number one, for us, is to observe. Let's observe the dynamics. Let's observe what's happening. Let's observe with compassion, not with judgment. Let's observe what is happening for this leader. Let's study, what are the pressures they feel? Where are those pressures coming from? Who are the people they feel accountable to? Because even when it's the top person in the organization, they feel accountable to the board. Even the board feels accountable, to, well, there's our constituents out in the community. Then the community's like, well, we're so everyone's feeling pressure of accountability. So just study the leader. What's happening for you? Where's the pressure? And then start to explore, who does that leader listen to? there were plenty of ideas I had that my CEO could not hear from me. Like they couldn't come from me. She just wouldn't be able to hear them given the pressures she was dealing with. That wasn't anything wrong with me or wrong with her. It's just she was in the pressure. But she had another close colleague who was an advisor. And if that advisor told her, same idea, I might say, she'd be like, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. So let's listen for, what are the patterns? Who are the influencers? And how do we begin to go where the energy is strong, where we can bring the people along we need to bring along, and then those people can do the work of bringing along other people. That way we're not stuck in, I just can't get this person on board, which can then take us out of the game. So that's a little bit of what I used over time. And then again, to not make it wrong that I couldn't influence my CEO, sometimes the message needed to come from 3 other people or from an external study or something before she could be like, okay, I feel comfortable with this. Yeah, and that can be okay. People need different things to feel settled, comfortable, and supported.
And also, I think people and organization systems, I think there are different points of readiness as well. And so it has to be the right time for them as well. And so
Right.
the early adopters are more ready in terms of time. And then we know the wave is coming.
Yeah.
There is a
Yeah, and we
knowing.
can also switch the question. Instead of it being this leader is ready, yes, no, it can
Yeah.
be a spectrum. What level of readiness? This is where the assessment's really cool. What level of readiness do we have here, and where do we begin, so that everyone can progress, along the spectrum, and we're not treating as well, you're no for
Yeah,
you.
certainly not yes or no. We meet as coaches, we meet our clients where they are. So we start where they want to start.
Exactly. And we honor that. We honor the origin, we honor the present, that experience, and then we can still dream up into the future, what could be.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Yeah,
sharing.
guys. Okay. So Amrita had a question, and I'm going to add mine to that based on what you shared a while earlier. So her question is, if you're willing to share, there is so much impactful outer work that you engage in both as a coach at Pinata and also as a chief people officer. What is some of the inner work that you are committed to? That's her question, and I'm going to add mine to it. Sometime back, you said in a response to a question that while you're walking down, you would sense a lot of things, right? You should start picking up things among teams, people, maybe in the air, the energy. And my question there is, how would you take care of yourself? Because you would then pick up on a lot, right?
Mhm.
And so, of course, there is stuff that is energizing, and then there's also stuff that is not as much. And then how would you sit with all of that? So these are
Yeah.
the 2 questions. I thought they were related, and so I posed them together to you.
Yes, the more aware we are, the more aware we are of all of the things. So, yes, I do find that the more I explore the inner self, the more depth there is to explore. And so, starting to just relate to this as the work is never done, the exploration's never done, and that can be very fun. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong. I haven't mastered who I am. It can just be, I'm still becoming. No, I'm still becoming. And this is now the inner work, the inner exploration is now a way of life for me. Before it was scary, it was new, I wasn't sure if this was for me. Now I realize that it is me. Like it just is me. It's all interconnected in that way. And it shows up all the time. It showed up yesterday when I picked my 2 kids up from school, and we were all 3 of us talking about our hard day. What made our day hard? How can we normalize? Like this was a tough moment for all of us. And then we take a breath, we got some ice cream, we talked about our days, and we can just normalize that we're not always happy and everything's perfect every day. And that
Yeah.
is itself a practice of just presence and honoring. This is how it is right now. It doesn't mean it's always going to be this way. It's just this is how it is right now. And we can hold that. And that's very different than how I grew up, where it's like, nope, we're going to pretend nothing's wrong, and we can honor that as well, that was part of that story, which has opened up this story of being able to say, oh, there's another way where we can allow that. So it's in the micro moments. It's in the day to day. It's in the, oh gosh, I got this really negative feedback from someone that they didn't like something I created. Maybe that's not a problem to solve. Maybe that's a chance to create something new. And how can I look at that with compassion for myself, for the other person, for what I created, as just the step that opens up what's next. So it really is now, I think, a way of being and a way of going through life, of starting to treat all of it as an exploration, and to start to see in all the places where I've been making problems with myself, with my husband, with my children, with my business, with, my leadership, that actually all of that is just growth. It's just openings to new growth. If I allow myself to see that as, how can I relate to these things with love, compassion, kindness, and a vision of what's possible, honoring always, what was. So it's everywhere now. That's the good thing. And it's always just a practice. So I relate to it now as a way of life and a practice. And the more we practice, the more we practice. So that can be a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Amazing. This has
Well,
been
thank you so much. Yeah, I
yeah,
could go on, but I'm just looking at the time now. I could just go on. And I'm sorry, Mark and Amrita, I haven't left a few minutes for you guys, but I'm now going to quickly hand over to you all. Laura, it's been an absolute privilege to have this conversation with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Natasha.
Mark,
Thank you for holding the
I'll
space.
quickly just hand over to you. And
yeah. And thank you, Natasha, for holding space for this beautiful conversation and being so present with Laura. And, I think really asking some beautiful questions that has given us a much greater feel for the power of inner work and how it ripples out into all aspects of our lives. I love what you said at the end, Laura, about this is just becoming a way of life. So that's the ultimate ripple, perhaps, is when it's, it's not like a thing that we do, it's a way of life. And so, it's a really very beautiful. And I can never get enough of that story of you writing the email in the middle of the night. So I thank you again for sharing that. It always makes me smile and makes me really happy. And again, and I think that is also such a great example of a ripple, how one email, 8 years ago is now, we wouldn't be here if you hadn't written that, right? And we wouldn't be having this conversation. So how all these things are connected, I'm always in awe of that. And I really value that very much. And yeah, just honor you for your journey and everyone who's shown up and all of us, I think you said, we're on the cutting edge, right? We're not alone. We're on the cutting edge. So let's keep carving this path together. So thank you. And Amrita, anything you would like to close with? What I'll do also is I'm going to share my screen. There's a couple of resources. So this is the resource section, but there's also a couple of resources that people might want to check out. So Laura has a newsletter, and that's a great way to stay in touch with her. She also has a program called the Breakthrough Builder that I think is coming up, so also very much worth checking out. And the link to the Human Potential Assessment has already been shared, but here's also a way of accessing that. So feel free to check any of this out. Laura is also on LinkedIn, obviously, Instagram. You can follow her there as well. Amrita.
Just wanted to say thank you to all of you who joined and who stayed and who are here. And it's just a reminder that these kind of conversations are not really meant for just boardroom conversations or great strategy meetings, but it's in quiet moments like this when we convene together and share of ourselves. We support each other. We're not alone in it, and we definitely are at the cutting edge. So thank you so much, Laura, for sharing your wisdom and your heart into this space, and Natasha for holding it so beautifully. I really hope each one of you will carry something back with you, maybe a question, a reflection. This is part of our resource series, and I hope you'll come back. The next one will be on the 1st of October, and that's on the workplace as a fertile soil for transformation. And we'll, of course, be in touch with you. Lakshmi from our team will reach out to you for anything that you feel resonating with you to continue this dialogue. And we're here and we're connected. But thank you so much for being with all of us. And thank you so much, Laura. I enjoyed every bit of that conversation and made a couple of notes that I'll stay with. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Go well. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
You. Until the next time.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.